to put down, oh, I don't know if anyone else got that notification, but we're being recorded, just so you know. And if that's a problem, please do let us know, but you can just keep yourself off video if that is a challenge. But so we're recording, we're live. And if you could put down on this timeline, oh, I think I'm getting a, whoops. Sorry about that, 1 second. I don't know if you can see that line there, but Kaluki has already put a stamp on the line, and if you want to do the same, you can gauge where your comfort level is. So maybe you haven't tried fundraising before and you're not sure where to start. Maybe you're comfortable with it and it's a learning experience, or maybe you're really comfortable with it and it's a passion of yours and you have lots of experience. So please let us know. It seems like people are sort of in that middle area, which is great.
It is interesting to see the hearts and the stars coming up, and yeah, that like Caroline is saying, we do have people that have some experience, you know, around fundraising. And I think this is really exciting that you're not speaking with people that are new to this process. So we can learn together on this and make it as inclusive as possible for all of us.
Definitely. Yeah, and I'm actually seeing quite a few people with little dots more in the comfortable area. So this is awesome. I think we'll be able to share learnings with each other and hear from people's experience working in fundraising and proposal writing. So I think we can here, and then we can keep going. And Kaluki, I can't see the chat, but are people entering where they're coming from? Do you mind reading a few?
Yes, I think as you're doing that, I can definitely read. I'm seeing Irene Nagudi with Kichini Guidance Initiative from Uganda. Akadeni Nancy is with Meta Research. She's also joining from Kenya. We have Leona joining from Rwanda. Murithi from Kenya. We have Solange, One Up Action Burundi. We do have Ibrahim Yunusa from Nigeria. I'm seeing Vivian Kemboi from Kenya, Joshua Aita from Uganda. I'm seeing the Sunday Geoffrey from Cameroon, Gabi Baez from Brazil, Odiambo Ronald from Kenya. There's like quite a huge representation here. So definitely people joining from across the world and across the regions.
That's awesome. Well, welcome everyone. Thanks for joining. I think we'll move on from the annotation, but thank you so much for everyone's contributions. So it really does seem like we've got folks who are trying learning and also in the very comfortable, kind of leaning towards the very comfortable space. So this is an exciting space for us to be in. I'm just going to clear all the annotations there and we'll keep going with the presentation. But thanks for participating on that. So I think this is my slide here. I'm going to share a little bit of an introduction to the Grant and Proposal Writing 101 that we'll be talking about today in this hour that we have together. We're going to start by talking about partnerships and opportunities to build out your team. So we're really celebrating that big success, and it was all thanks to working as a big team and being able to collaborate with funding for the sustainability of our team. But that's number one. Developing a mission and vision and theory of change. So TOC, you'll see that through the presentation, and we'll walk through what that means a little bit later on. Creating a compelling narrative, quantifying the impact, so showcasing your results being that end kind of monitoring and evaluation in advance of the proposals, but also after you've been successful in evaluating the work that you've done.
Definitely. And with that, then I think the question we need to ask ourselves is then what is, you know, what is a grant, right? And so loosely, then the definition is shown on the screen that these are monies that, you know, an organization is given or by another organization or by a government towards achieving a particular purpose. And grant giving organizations range from, the likes of what you've heard, World Bank, the Global Environment Facility, and also governments, your own country, your different counties, local or regional governments can actually also give you grants to do some community work, some developmental work or other kinds of work. And probably as we start this, we need to maybe have a clear like basing on, the components of a grant proposal. And these ones, please note that we are basing them out of, grants that are to be written or are written for social change, for development work, or for community related aspects. And the number one thing is actually that you need to, or your grant needs to have a problem statement, at times called the need statement. So then, clearly just identifying what problem you want to fix. At times, this can take the form of, probably you have a community that is probably faced with drought or famine, right? So that is a problem that you want to fix. And as you're putting together your grant proposal, then you understand what your problem is and how you are, planning on fixing it. Also try to, indicate in the need statement, the broad impact of the problem. So for instance, if flooding is the problem statement, then how was that impacted on the communities for it to qualify for the grants that you are applying for, yeah? And then the next thing then is, the goals and objectives. So then in this particular component, then you ask yourself, or you answer these questions: what change will the grant bring? So if you successfully secure this grant, then what change is it going to bring to the community and to the local context that you are applying for? And are the outcomes measurable? Are the outcomes measurable? At times when we do grant writing, some people might actually just do it for the sake of doing it, or because we want to get the money, but we've not planned for it. But for social change, community development projects, or these kinds of avenues to get grants, you need to be intentional about it and make sure that the outcomes are clearly stated and are measurable. For instance, like we'll have transformed around 800 people in community X, be better able to prepare to build resiliency around flooding and all that, and that's really important. But remember that a goal in your grant writing is basically a broad statement of purpose, whereas an objective is a specific outcome. So let's take for example, you're applying for a grant and you want to set a goal and an objective. So loosely we can create a goal to establish a locally inclusive forest restoration community that will foster sustainable forest management in community X. And then the question next is what are the objectives of this grant writing proposal under your broader goal? And for instance, you can say maybe your objective is as a result of your efforts, the project will bring around 80% of community members to design and implement a management strategy for restoration of probably say 20,000 hectares of degraded forest ecosystem at Kisani Forest over a 4-year period. So you see there is that measurable outcome. You're giving some, the timeline, you're giving some figures, and you're giving a clear impact on how that is going to transform your community. Yeah. And then for project design and activities as the next component of the grant writing proposal, then you need to answer the question, what are the specific proposed activities to address your problem? So remember, you've already set out the problem statement, you've worked on the goals and the objectives, and now you have to list the activities accompanying the goals and the objectives and the broader goal that you are having for this particular program or project that you're applying for. And on these, then you need to also convince the funder or the donor, like why you think, this it's important. Why is it important? You also need to, work on some case studies around, any previous such proposal or programs that have been run to better support your candidacy for this particular application, so that then it stands the test of time, and then you're able to move to the next level and probably potentially secure your grant. The next thing is on qualifications, why individuals, organizations, qualify to execute this project. Again, do you have previous experience on this, or do you have people within your team who can actually have different expertise and can help to implement the various project activities within your proposed project or program? And then there's a component on assessment, evaluation, and dissemination. Again, this one is pegged on numbers that we talked about before, and also speaking loosely about the actions that you'll take to determine if the project is working or not working. Again, you might apply for projects and you get the grants, but what you had planned for might not work out. But then the assessment, monitoring, and evaluation is very important. Why? Because it really helps. It helps to sort of like give guidance and help you create some learning moments, even as you are implementing your solution on the ground. So you need to like factor in that component to help you, determine overall success, give insights into the potential effectiveness of the proposed solution that you're creating for your community. And also really, it helps in terms of scaling up and replication of successful programs on the ground. And then you need to also factor in the question of, how you share and disseminate what your learnings. Are you, for instance, going to do some publications? Are you going to host some local interviews with media houses? Or are you going to co-author, like a book or a research paper to really support some best practices around the solution that you had applied for in your grant? So this is very important. And lastly, in terms of budgeting, again, I mean, if you're applying for the grant, then the budget has to be part of that, yeah? So, be specific in requesting a cost. And this does not mean that, you write a very cheap budget that is going to cost you in terms of implementation. Think about every cost that's going to be paid to your project and list them down, and then do your research, understand how much it's going to cost for a particular item, and have that reflected on your proposal writing. And then obviously it could include things like salaries. For instance, if your project or program is to incorporate some paid staff, then you need to incorporate the salaries for the staff. You need to, maybe if people will be traveling, have a traveling cost covered in or captured in the budget. Maybe some equipment that you need to purchase for implementation of this a solution or project, or you need to probably buy some reading materials for the recipients or participants in the project implementation, then that needs actually to be reflected on a project. And I think generally those are the main components of grant proposal writing. If we could go to the next slide. Thank you. The next one before I hand over to Caroline is, when you talk about grant proposals, there are two things. They have some types, that different types of grants that you can actually apply for proposals under, and there are also different grant projects that you can, also like work around. So when you talk about the types of proposals that you can put forward, the number one type is letter proposals. These are just like loose 2 to 3 pages, very short proposal that you write to request for funding for something. Usually it's based on less than $25,000. For those of us in Kenya, that will be around 2.5 million Kenya shillings. So usually that will qualify for a letter proposal. So then in this case, you don't need to be like deeply detailed for a full proposal. but you should also like be sure to cover the same content that would have gone into a full proposal, but in a much more condensed way. The next type is letter of intent or inquiry. So at times, you might have seen on some online platforms that granting or funding groups, might just like make a call for people that want to, apply for a particular opportunity, to grant for a particular solution that this funding group wants to be done or implemented on a local, project or program. So then you are required, or they ask you to write and submit a letter of intent or a letter of inquiry. So they ask you to do this before the full application, ideally to just give the funder an idea or perspective on how you guys want to implement a proposed solution as per the funders like project alignment. So then you just submit that letter and you follow the guidelines that they've given. And basically what the letter does, is that it just summarizes the project that you are proposing to implement if you get this grant from the funders or the granting organization. And then obviously they give some guidelines. So be sure to be concise and follow the exact guideline that they give. Different funders will give different guidelines to guide you as you're submitting your letter of inquiry or letter of intent. And the final one that I think most people are interested in today or have engaged in is the full proposal that is quite detailed. And on this, I think what I can say, because this is like now the detailed version of a letter proposal, is that you're writing or putting forward a full project proposal. And what I'll tell you is that different funders, again, have different requirements. So number one, be sure to do some background research about the funder, because different funders have different ways that they fund. They have different projects or programs that they fund. So even as you apply for a particular project, ask yourself, is it aligned within the cause and the ethics and the areas of work that the funder is working or setting aside the funds for, right? What do they fund? What are the anticipated processes? Because again, maybe funder one can just tell you to submit the process and then you'll be shortlisted and then called for like the next steps. And then funder two can actually ask you or require you to submit, write a full proposal, and then there'll be a screening process, and then you'll be invited for some interviews. At times, you'll be shortlisted, or, there'll be some background research that they'll call you to, clarify some questions. So you need to also be open to those things and be prepared to answer them as the funder is requesting you. And again, another thing that is very important, as you put forward a full proposal, remember that different format guidelines that funders or granting organizations give. And this can span from, small things like font types, font sizes, the number of pages that they require a full proposal to have, or like line spacing. So if you alter some of these small things, you actually miss out on a key funding opportunity. So it's important to do your background research and clearly follow what guidelines the funders or the granting organizations are giving. And then again, we can never be the judges and executioners of our own cases. So if you're applying for this, like writing this full proposal, have someone either within your team or an independent party somewhere to, proofread, counter-check some errors in this proposal, at least before you send it and make an application for at the donors or funding organization. And then quickly, I just mentioned about the projects that, you can write proposals under. And I had mentioned before, one particular is, you want to apply for projects, granting projects around social change or advocacy. And most of us are drawn from different advocacy organizations. So then you can put forward a project proposal for social change or advocacy. You can also put a grant proposal for a project on outreach. So basically you want to maybe do some outreach work for communities, or to probably get more youth involved in something, and you want some financial support to put forth to make this work. So you can put a proposal for that. You can also do some grant proposal for research projects. for those of us in academia and also in community works, you can apply for a research project. And finally, for a project on community development. So either of these you can apply, and at times you can also several types of projects can also be combined as you're applying your grant proposal. And I hope that was a bit in depth and concise. So I wish to hand over to Caroline to take us to the next slide.
Awesome. Thanks so much for sharing all that information, Kaluki. And I just want to encourage everyone that there was a lot of information and tips and tools shared in there. So if you have any questions, maybe just jot them down, or you can add them to the chat. And we want to make sure that we talk about them. And you may also have different experiences running through different types or different projects for grant proposals too. And so if you have ideas to share with the rest of the members on this call, I would encourage you to write them down, and then we'll be sure to share ideas in the question and answer at the end. Just thought I'd take a moment to say that. But one of the things that we've found, especially in the long proposal, and I apologize if you hear birds in the background because I'm just in a park, but let me know if it's disturbing you. But one of the things that we found, especially in the long proposal, has been including a theory of change, and that being important, as Kaluki has shared, the importance of identifying your needs and the problem statement, that being an important part to share how your solution, how your proposal will be addressing that need, and how what are the outcomes that are proven, and what kind of impact you're going to be able to have. So coming from that phrase, what we often use in terms of developing a theory of change, whether it's a specific theory of change for a pillar, for example, storytelling at Youth for Nature has its own theory of change, a little bit different from the overarching theory of change at Youth for Nature. And what we've been able to use is sort of like, if this happens, then this will happen because this will happen. And so we identify what the purpose of our theory of change is. So for us, it might be uplifting the voices of young people. Then decision makers will pay attention because the power of people is unstoppable, but it is similar to along the lines of what we use as a theory of change at Youth for Nature. But identify that purpose of the theory of change is step one. And so I'll just walk you through the 6 steps, but I encourage you, if you have a chance to take a screenshot or something, we'll also share the slides and include the link to this specific theory of change tool that we use. Step 2 is develop a vision and define desired change. This was a process that Youth for Nature engaged in our first year of operations, once we got our first big grant that was going to fund our full staff team. And we decided to jump into a mission and vision resetting, just to make sure that all team members felt aligned with the vision, and to make sure that we were upholding our hopes to be horizontal decision making and non-hierarchical. And so this was a really important phase for us to really align ourselves as a team. Step 3 is to identify domains of change. So areas of impact and what the hopes in determining what your outcomes are going to be. It's sort of visioning yourself at the end point. What does success look like? And walking back and seeing, how do we get there? Identifying what are those pathways. Then identifying strategic priorities. And when we share this resource, it'll be helpful for you to see that the strategic priorities could be around programming goals, around activities, but they could also be determined through quantitative and qualitative measures too. So these strategic priorities can be determining a kind of impact that you want to have in your community, but it can also be about the number of young people you want to reach out to, or what kind of outreach you want to have as well. Step 5 is to develop pathways for change, and this is, as we were kind of sharing, is what are the tools that you need to implement the action. And then reviewing and adapting the theory of change is making sure that you include monitoring and evaluation and fine-tuning. Does the theory of change match what your attention was and the funders. So this theory of change was one of the tools that we were using and communicating when in meetings with funders. And it has been, I would say, one of the helpful measures of success for us. So I'll carry on to the next slide here. Another tool to measure success is these SMART goals and objectives. So Kaluki had shared the difference between goals and objectives, one being the importance of objectives being specific, measurable. And so we'll just walk you through this one here. You might have heard about the SMART goals, but they are ones that are specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-based. And you might have heard different variations on this, but making sure that as you develop a proposal that you're always coming back to this saying, you know, if your goal is to use social media as your outreach to young people, if that's a great goal. And how is that going to be measured? Well, our audience is going to be reaching impressions of 1 million young people, or we're going to build a platform that reaches 1,000 followers across Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn, for example. That would be helpful in terms of identifying your specific goals, and then measurable would be identifying the kind of quantitative numbers. So, you know, your numbers of followers, for example, but also it could be measurable through qualitative impact. So, you know, what kind of feedback are you getting from people? And in terms of engagement, are you getting good comments on there? And this could be applied to any aspect of your proposal. So this could be related to, your specific goals, but also related before you even start the project, determining what your intention is in developing your proposal. And happy to answer any questions about that. The time-based one is especially important in determining for your proposal how long you aim to do, but also to ensure that you're giving yourself proper compensation too. How much time do you think it'll take to develop this project? And are you appropriately compensating yourself with that? And often grants will cover program costs, but we're seeing more and more funders also be able to cover operational costs to determine sort of what is the administrative aspect, what kind of work do you need to promote your program, and including those operation costs into your proposals is important too, to make sure you're accounting for that time. So I hope that was helpful. We will be able to answer any questions around these tools. But I think I'll pass it to you, Kaluki.
Thank you so much, Caroline. That's a really good in-depth analysis of the theory of change and how that really helps in terms of qualifying most fundraising grant applications, and also the SMART goals and objectives. I cannot understate the importance of that. And so we've come from the components of a good, grant proposal. We've talked about, like the theory of change to support the STEM. We've gone through SMART goals, right? And now, probably as we move to the next segment, we just need to quickly, just also try to learn together, what are some elements of good proposals? And in no particular order, I'll quickly be taking us through this deep dive of some elements of good proposals. And again, to remind you that at Youth for Nature, one thing we always say is we are not knowledge, the absolute knowledge holders in everything. We are learning on this together, and we invite all of you to share your different perspectives, your learning points, and therefore being able to learn together. But having said that, the one of the elements is the question on relevance and significance. So as you're writing your grant proposal, then ask yourself, then how relevant is it to this funding stream, to this funding phase, to this funding space, and how significant is it, right? Are we applying maybe for like we are living in a climate era, or maybe let's use a case of COVID, right? So there's a funder wants to send some money or to give some money to support community mass vaccination, and so they are calling people to apply for funding for this. And for instance, Kaluki goes ahead and applies for proposal to fund farmers to, enhance their food baskets and engage, local communities on environmental education, you see. So there's no relevance in that because number one, the funder is focusing on, like mass vaccination for COVID-19, and I'm applying for projects to, enhance something around farming. So you see, if I'm not reflecting that relevance and significance on my project, then it might not qualify, at the stage of screening and, qualification to the next level. The next one is, accountability. And this speaks to demonstrable management structures. So as you are applying for this proposal, right? So are you a good steward? Will you assure to, properly manage the funds if they are sent to you? Do you actually have a proper bookkeeping system? Do you have someone who can actually handle budgeting well and ensure every project cost is met and you are able to succeed in implementation phase of the projects? So that's very important. Accountability is important. Yes, even after you get the grants, can you be trusted enough to put the money you applied for into the real solutions that you had hoped to implement? The next one is on internal logic. And this we had already covered in one of our previous slides. So it speaks to, you've already ensured that you state a clear need or problem within your proposal. Then you've highlighted the goals that you are hoping to achieve, the objectives you want to also like reflect on these projects, the activities that will go into your, project or program, bits about how you're going to evaluate success or failure of your project, and also like, the proposal having a reflection on the budget lines that you're applying for. The next one is on, at least being concise. I think most projects that get funded or proposals that get funded, I know the proposals that have, a lot of words, but, being concise and straight to the point is really important. And remember, the donor is not looking for, how many jargons you have. So if you can try to avoid or go slow on using jargons, please do. Use clear messaging and words that can help, support your candidature if you're applying for the particular grant you are going for. Also, the question on tables and graphics, we apply for funds, and one way we can make it easier for those who are reviewing and reading through the grants is to make sure that we have some tables reflected. And tables, for instance, could include things like, a budget tables where you're listing how much money you are asking for, how that money will be used for the different particular activities or different, projects and different, departments. So try to put tables, for instance, for, budgets, for the staff responsibilities, a table maybe for timelines on implementation of the solutions. That will really go a long way. Then be succinct, and this means being brief and clearly expressed. So as you're applying for a particular, grant or proposal, please just try to be straight to the point and clearly express your need and why you want to get, supported to do X program. And then again, have some reasonable, budgets. And this, I'll repeat again, doesn't mean that, you deny yourself, like the flexibility and make it extremely a small budget and therefore cost yourself when it comes to implementation phase. Again, remember to do your research about the cost of things. Also, if you're in a country and you're applying for budget, like if you're maybe anticipating paying some staff, then what are your country rates for paying of staff, maybe per hour rates or, some bit of a range. So be sure to do those background researches that will then help you in terms of coming up and adding a reasonable work with other people. So always when you're putting together a proposal, a good proposal is one that actually you are applying not by yourself, but you have identified other partners who can do a particular activity within the project, and therefore going together as a network or a group of more than 2 or 3 organizations and strong backing towards succeeding in the grant application. The next one is on, a good proposal is well researched and, fact-based, that you're not communicating on theories and some, unverified facts, but you're actually using data and some statistics and research on other works to, put together this application, and you're clearly showing, the impact that it's going to bring if you're funded or if you get to succeed in this grant application. Again, being objective. I know there's some, and probably some of you have experienced this, that some people will go and apply for a project, and for instance, maybe around COVID-19, that it was anticipated that many Africans will die because of this, pandemic, because countries were not well prepared. And so some people with ill motives come together and they're like, oh, let's put together a quote unquote project to maybe seek to support these poor Africans to come and, like be able to, sort of like plan to live around COVID-19 and everything. And so they'll apply and they get it. But the question is, are they objective? Are they applying for this grant for their own self-gratification and, promoting their own personal issues? So being objective and knowing what you want and the intention behind your application is equally important. And lastly, tell a good story. I found the ones a really like good, convincing story. And I know young people have really amazing and inspiring stories. So if you can tell a good story, you can really convince donors to come and support your cause. And I hope that was really helpful. And the next slide, I'd wish to quickly talk about partnerships. And, as they are clearly stated, number one, building out your team, finding alignment and groups you want to work with, and foundations to grow scalable impacts. One thing I think most people find burnouts on is the fact that you are doing all this alone. You are applying for different projects and you are doing it alone. The whole process of actually even putting together a proposal is like, it's tiring. Caroline will tell you this. And so if you don't have a supportive team and if you've not identified the different strengths that your team bring, then you'll actually have burnouts. You'll maybe have a lot of anxiety, and you will most likely not execute good, proposal applications. So it's always good to identify your team, to actually build your team, to look for partners and mentors who are to help you in the process, especially understanding what you don't know on certain things as you're putting together your proposal. And really also in terms of, the skills and resources that you can also offer your team that is working on grant writing and proposal writing. So looking for opportunities to train them, to get them better equipped to even help in writing of the proposals can really go a long way. And there are organizations that actually give trainings on grant writing. And so identifying this again becomes a huge resource to support you, advance you, grant writing processes. The next one is on, previous slide, consortiums and partnerships are very important. So try to identify the key partners and try to identify who are the people that can complement whatever you are putting together in the proposal, and invite them actually to contribute to this proposal and bring their different perspectives and how they're also going to chip in and support. You find that even as you're applying for a grant, you don't necessarily need all the money that you are applying for. At times you find there's an organization actually that can support in kind some of the activities proposed. So whereas you are to apply for a $10,000 proposal, organization X is actually willing to cater the cost of a particular activity. So that will help bring down that, the amount that you're applying for. And so this partner actually comes in handy and helps mitigate some of the cost to the project. Then again, I work on identifying grants and funders on a constant basis. There's a lot of, opportunities out there. But if you don't have a team that can really help you to, identify some of these grants, some of these potential funders, then again, it becomes a problem and consistency, and it might also delay your team in terms of, sustainability on grant writing and the sale, and the likes. And as you're identifying your partners, your grantors and funders, then the question I think around partnership is who aligns with your project and your mission. Different projects actually require different funders, so you might have a very good idea, but then you're applying it to a wrong funder. So your project is dead upon arrival, not because it is not sustainable or executionable. It's just that it was sent to the wrong line with your project, people that align with your mission. And this speaks to, like, as you're applying, tell your genuine story around that project. Tell your genuine story. That will go a long way, as opposed to fabricated and far-fetched, non-objective, ideas that you put together for a proposal for funding. And then lastly, as I hand over to Caroline, is, try to identify the roles and responsibilities while you are putting together your grant application. For instance, you from the case that I gave, that you're applying to, create a solution for a community to restore some amount of acreage for a local community, then probably one of the responsibilities will be around, mapping, and then maybe your team doesn't have skills or expertise in, mapping and GIS skills, then actually who is the partner who can actually come and fill in that role or responsibility? Then maybe you need an accountant who is going to manage the cost. So all these needs to be clearly stipulated and to be stated as you're putting together your proposal and as you're engaging on the question on partnerships. And lastly, be sure about deadlines as you're, writing, putting forward your proposal. And within deadlines, understand, give yourself the timeline. So this is the time maybe for us to be able to successfully write and submit a proposal. We need to, from week 1 or week 2 to start brainstorming. Then, we go to the next stage of populating and, giving flesh to the skeletal brainstorming that we had in week 1. And then at week 4, we are going to, specifically work with the funding leads in our organization who are going to ensure that actually throughout the process, they're the ones, leading in terms of writing together and putting a very actionable proposal. And then again, identifying clear goals for the grants that you're working on. And also, like the question of tailored projects, as you're putting them together again, I remember I said there are very many projects. So as you're applying for them, know that there are many of them that you can apply for, and there are also different funders and grantors out there. So think about tailor-made projects that you want to write proposals for and that you want to create solutions for. And so partnerships are very important as you are working on your grant and proposal writing. Caroline, over to you.
Thank you so much. And already what you're sharing, Kaluki, brings up so many good ideas for me too to mention. So I'll just touch on a couple other points that I would add to the partnerships specifically. But it's natural in the youth climate movement to feel like there might be competition for funding. And when we say partnerships, it also means about collaborating on proposals together. If you're maybe from the same community and there's one central pool for funding, it could be an advantage to partner up together so that you maximize impact and might be able to access more funding. Something that we've done as well is group up partners who are the funders, or go together with bigger organizations like environmental nonprofit organizations that are working internationally who have a broader reach. Funders. So that is something that I would recommend as well, to kind of avoid the competition, but to collaborate instead. And then another point that I wanted to add here is just around partnership principles. When engaging with a new funder, we found it helpful to share partnership principles to determine sort of what are our grounding principles and how do we want to move forward together. And if anything comes up with a partner that doesn't feel quite right, or that you feel you need to advocate for, you can refer back to these partnership principles to say, you know, we're grounded in justice and equity, and this is what it means to us. And being able to share those principles is really important. So those are things that I wanted to add and could be helpful. But I'll continue on with the next slide because we could just keep chatting and chatting. But as I was saying, these grounding principles, I just noticed that that's one of the top points here. So these top tips that we wanted to share with you all is also number one, to develop relationships with funders. The worst thing that happens is when you put hours and hours and hours into a proposal and then you realize, oh, I was actually not eligible. I wasn't in the specific country of applicants that were allowed to apply for this funding, or you know, if you previously received funding before from a partnered organization, you can't reapply for funding. That has happened to us in the past. It's a good learning experience because it probably won't happen again. But it also is always good to kind of check the eligibility criteria and then build a relationship with the funders in advance. Ideally, if you know the funding deadline in advance, you know, even a month ahead, you can just be able to reach out to the funders and ask any questions in advance specific to your program, and that might help build a stronger proposal for you too. The second one is tailor your proposal to the funders. So they might have specific criteria, they might, you know, have specific target audiences that they want to reach, and depending on your work, you don't necessarily want to compromise your vision, and it might just mean that the funding is not aligned, but it is often like a small shift that might need to happen with your proposal to match what your funder is asking for. So maybe they're asking for a specific problem statement, and you need to create that to meet your funder's needs. We've been able to kind of mix and match with the content that we have developed over the course of the past few years developing proposals. Is once you create these funding proposals, then at some point you just reach a stage where you can start kind of copy pasting and making a collage of funding proposals, and being able to develop strong proposals that are tailored to the funders. And that's just like any application process, but is quite clear. Creating partnerships and joint proposals, well, we just touched on that. Setting soft deadlines to apply. I think most people are probably deadline motivated, but a lot of funders like to review applications on a rolling basis. And so that can be an advantage sometimes to apply early. And then if there is a very clear deadline set, you don't want to be applying at midnight as much as we do do that sometimes. It is helpful to set soft deadlines so that your team can review the proposal in advance, and so that you are all feeling comfortable before submitting and before the actual submission date. We talked about these partnership principles. Another element is to share impact reports with funders. So once you have reached the stage, as we shared with the theory of change and the follow-up with the monitoring and evaluation stage, it's really helpful. And we could run a whole webinar on that too, on monitoring and evaluation. And that's a process that Youth for Nature is engaging in at the moment, actually. But the monitoring and evaluation helps to develop your impact report, where you can share those impressive numbers of maybe the number of people that you talk to about your project before starting it, or maybe it's the number of social media reach, or maybe it's the number of program participants who joined your online session. So these are all good numbers to share back with your funders, but also those who are participating in your programs. Maintaining timely and quarterly connections. This is helpful for establishing relationships with funders. Asking for feedback. So this is helpful, especially if you aren't successful with an application, to learn from past failures and past challenges is helpful. Assessing progress and results by evaluation. So if you determine in advance what success looks like, it's helpful to look back on the work that you've done and on the past proposals to see what could I have done better and how can I improve for the next time. Lessons learned from failure. So as we said, it's inevitable that you'll write a proposal and it might not be successful, or it might not be the perfect fit for your funder. But it's always helpful to look at it as if every application is a learning opportunity. It's easier said than done because often it's discouraging, and it's okay to sit with that feeling of disappointment too. That's an important part of it. And that's actually something within our fundraising task force, that we like to celebrate the big wins that we get in terms of funding, but we also celebrate the learning opportunities too. And those are just as important, if not even more important, to enrich the learning opportunities for the next time. Following up with funders for feedback, as we said, it is really helpful if they're able to provide constructive criticism. And then the applications, being able to cut and paste, and then recording learnings for the future. So we've already shared these, but helpful to put out like this. And then Kaluki, I don't know if you wanted to mention these, but I can touch on a few of these here. We wanted to share applications. We know that several participants here on the call are from the African Regional Group, and specifically Kenya. So we wanted to share some examples. Kaluki plugged this WWF, World Wildlife Federation? I always see it as WWF, but Kenya Climate Change Grants. And this one has an application deadline that is coming up soon. So if you have a chance to check that out, we'll be able to share the links in the chat for you. And then the African Climate Change Fund is one that is an international fund for implementation on the ground of climate change solutions. So another application that's upcoming. And then the Uplink Climate Adaptation Fund. The Uplink grant, we recently actually applied to a fund that is called Generation Restoration, and they often have these awesome challenges for funding that either have a deadline or they're accepting on a rolling basis. But we would welcome you to check out that website because they have some really region-specific funding opportunities, and then ones that are very thematic based. So climate adaptation being one of their recent challenges. And then Kaluki, I'll just pass it over to you so you can share about the GoFundMe campaign and to sort of wrap it up.
Exactly. And thank you, Caroline. And as I'm doing that, I'm also quickly trying to put some of the links on the chat box. We'll be able to send the exhaustive one before the end of this webinar. But yeah, for GoFundMe, I think most of you have actually, even when you're engaging in your project, there's this GoFundMe fundraiser that people usually create accounts online, and you actually, ask people from across the world to support some project. And it's a very simple way of supporting, especially grassroots, community-led and youth-led initiatives. So you just register an account and you put up a GoFundMe page with details about, like the problem that you want to solve and some of the ideas or solutions you're proposing, and then asking people to support you to be able to then get the resources that you need and the support you need to actually get this implemented on the ground. So GoFundMes are really like some simple ways that you can take advantage of to implement some solutions. I'll also talk to some of you might have some existing legal websites. So again, it's also important if you're registered and you have a bank account for your organization, then take advantage of the donations box button, and have that added on your website. It really helps in terms of funding and fundraising to support some actions, and also really getting support from people that want to just give to a good cause. And some of these are the ways that I feel we can explore how funding is done and how we access resources. And again, like we said, we don't necessarily have all the knowledge on this. We know you guys might have more, so let us know if you've had some more experience around fundraising and what platforms you've been using to actually access these. And then also happy to also try them out at Youth for Nature, or also recommend to young people here to follow through and access such funding.
Yeah, so we just shared the social media links here to connect with us. Our handles are Youth Y for Nature on all platforms. You can check out our website. If you have any questions for us, you can email either our first names at youthfornature.org or hello@youthfornature.org to keep connected. We also have a feedback survey we would love for you to answer to see if this capacity building training was helpful in any way to you. And if you have comments on sort of how we delivered this session, Kaluki, if you don't mind sharing that in the chat, that would be awesome. Thank you so much. And then I think we're ready to move on to questions and answers. And I think that'll be the end of our screen sharing, because we'd love to hear from you. And if you want to go off mute and on video, maybe we'll check the chat to see if there are any questions that we should answer there. And maybe we'll pass it back to the moderators. Nelly, I don't know if that's you. And then we'll take some questions until the end of the session here. Thank you so much, everyone, for listening.
Yeah. Good evening, all. Thank you for listening. My name is Serone. I'm from KIUESA. Thank you, Caroline. Thank you, Paul, for the presentation. It was a really nice one. It was an educative one. We learned a lot from there. And I guess as at now, before we leave, maybe there are some few questions from the members of which you could maybe answer before we hear from them, if anyone has a comment. So I'll go straight to the first question, of which was asked by Nancy Kadenyi. Yeah, she was asking if, could you elaborate more on what one needs to consider when selecting partners to form a consortium or in the development of a proposal? So that was our first question. Maybe we could go through that one before we move to the next.
Yeah, that's a great question. Kaluki, do you want to answer first and then I'll add to it?
Sure thing. And I actually, I thought you'd go first because actually something that Caroline mentioned. I think the question of what Caroline said, that, one thing about your, partnership principles is you want to get partners to support you or work together towards co-creating a project or putting together a proposal for, funding. Then like knowing yourself, what are your missions, what are your vision and your goals, and then what are your partnership principles, and the partner you want to work on this project or program together, do they actually align with this project that you're proposing? And so if they don't, I think the best case scenario is actually to not work with them, or if they can, if they agreed actually to respect and uphold your principles on partnerships, actually, then they actually qualify to be partners to put together a proposal. One thing we've done at Y4N is that we've worked on like a one-page document that, like every time we are engaging with partners or bringing partners on board, we always send that as one of our initial engagement steps in the process. So we send them the partnership principles document, and then they go through it. And if they actually agree with our principles, they sign and send it back to us. And then from that point, we actually get to start engagements. Before that, then we don't consider that an effective partnership. So if for you, Nancy, you can also maybe find ways or explore ways that you can ensure that is catered even as you're approaching partners for your projects, then I think that could be a good way to align with partners. But Caroline, if you have something to add, maybe?
That was very well said, and strategic that you go first. But I would also add that just making sure that it feels vision aligned, and especially that it's advantageous for the specific fund that you're going for. So, if you're going for something on climate adaptation, going with a group, of course, that specializes in climate adaptation would be to your advantage. But having expertise that fills the gaps that you might not have. For example, for us, we might might have young people, international young people who are going to be part of the project, but we might not have the scientific background or the Indigenous knowledge holders that we're looking for to contribute in terms of our knowledge sharing pillar. That is something that we would partner with organizations that represent those scientific experts and the Indigenous knowledge holders that we'd be looking for. So that could be helpful in terms of identifying what are your gaps and figuring out partners that meet those needs as well, and that are also kind of reciprocal in that relationship, that you're providing them, you know, international youth perspective, or you're providing them a social media savvy and knowledge, and identifying what traits do you have to bring to them, and how can you benefit from them, and looking at that symbiotically, I think is really nicely. Is a nice approach. I'm seeing that we have a couple other questions up, but I feel like that's we could talk on and on about that one. Maybe we'll take the question from Pooja.
Thank you. Yeah, so I know Youth for Nature does a lot of different type of programming and work. And so when you apply for grants, like same with my platform, Youth Climate Collaborative, and the trickiness for me is when applying for a grant, should I talk about the platform in its entirety and the different programs? So like the overall problem and various programs, or is it generally, have you found better to stick with one particular program in all of your different programming and go that way?
That's a great question. And maybe this time, Kaluki, I'll answer first and you can jump on. But I would say that's a question that we always have, especially in determining the specific funding opportunity. So sometimes it's strategic to share the whole mission and vision of the organization, to describe what your problem statement is of your organization, and then share your specific initiative at the end, like, and sharing the whole project. But in some ways, if it's a specific amount of funding to deliver impact on the ground, for example, then it's strategic to share your program goals. So it is context dependent. We have had program, you know, especially for bigger budgets and contributions from foundations, especially, we found that it was strategic to share our whole vision and then to break it down and share how our programs that we deliver meet those specific mission elements. So we have those 3 pillars: knowledge sharing, capacity building, and storytelling. And we try to align our mission to be aligned with each of those 3 pillars and explain how our programming kind of fits within our whole organization. But then we've also more recently in the past kind of applied to specific program funding so that we could flesh out how does this one program meet our needs, that and just going more detailed into that. So I think that's a great question, but yeah, I think it is again context dependent. Kaluki, do you have other things to add?
Actually, no, I don't want to dilute your response. I feel like that really answers Pooja's really good question. So yeah, just highlighting your general mission and vision, and on a case-by-case situation, at times you maybe want to apply for specific initiative to feed to your main mission or particular project. So it depends really, and there's no really one way of applying. Like I think from what we said is that different funds also have different requirements. It's always good to, you know, do your background research, try to understand what the donor or the funder wants, and then you might tell exactly that fits into one component of your organizational mission. So again, trying to just put your focus on that, but obviously remembering that as you introduce yourself and make your case known, initially you've made your clear mission statement and a bit introduction about what you do, and that really gives a context into the funder's mindset as they review your applications.
Thank you both.
Thank you very much for that answer. I guess you've also answered on the second question that was asked in the chat box. Maybe if there's any clarification you'd give to him, because he was asking if you are writing the proposal, maybe is it good only to put much focus on the challenge or what you do, or is it just good you can include some stories on the impact of the proposal you're writing? Maybe if you can have something on that, and then we move on.
I think I can say, and Carol, please step in after me. remember the question that the slide that we talked about elements of a good proposal. So where number one, ensuring that yes, you clearly state what challenge or problem you are addressing by putting together your grant or proposal. And then from there, trying to offer solutions like, so what are the objectives of this particular project if you are to be funded? And out of the objectives, what are the activities you're going to embark on to create the solutions to the problem on the community, right? So this goes back to the, yes, you still mention about the challenges, but remember the point I gave you about let us tell a good story. A good story does not delve much into the problem. A good story is pragmatic and it looks forward into the solutions. So yes, state the challenges and the problems that you maybe you people have been facing in particular the context that you're applying for, or you're putting the application for, but also please be good to communicate some really also good studies or like some positive context out of whatever you're proposing in your proposal. And then again, remember the point you talked about, don't be objective, don't try to like extremely appeal to the funders' emotions. Have that balance, have that balance. Yes, state the challenges, but focus on the solution that you also are bringing and some activities that are to address some of the problems or challenges that you've identified as you're making your proposal. Caroline?
That's great. And I think the only thing I would add is that, aside from identifying your challenge and identifying the outcomes, also identifying the journey to get there and why you chose that activity to get there. So that would be your theory of change, and sort of understanding the pathway for change, not just to say, we noticed coastal erosion and so we're planting trees, but to say with young people planting trees, we're building a movement for restoration of coastal ecosystems. And maybe that's not the strongest theory of change at the moment I can think of, but just to explain the reasoning for why you're doing it. And I think that theory of change is what's going to sell the vision to the funders, I think. But that's a good question about sort of the order of how we go about proposals, and identifying the problem statement is often what we start our proposals with, just to determine kind of the state of affairs, why is there a need there, and then go into the theory of change, and then go into your proposed solutions and proposed impact. Yeah. I'll pass it back to you, I think, or did we have a question from Nancy, or is that a leftover question?
Yes, sure. I have a question. Thank you so much for the wonderful webinar that we've had. I had a question on what Kaluki presented on the types of proposals. Where does the concept writing lies? And are there specific templates that one can use, the simpler ones? Because you find there's some call for proposals, you're not given any specific template, so you are only supposed to use your summarized templates that you can share with us for us to be using in this writing. And then if the concept note is still under the types of proposals that are submitted in that process. Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy, for that question. Actually, I think if I were to answer that question, I feel like concept notes are more or less like brief documents into like the idea you're proposing or into a particular project you're applying for. So most of the times you find that they actually could qualify to, letter proposals where you just need we've seen like concept notes that are also 2 to 3 pages, so that will also qualify as a letter proposal. At the same time, remember we also said that you can also build up a letter proposal into a full proposal. So your concept note can also actually be more detailed and build up into a larger project proposal application. So it can be two ways. If your concept note is too brief and just highlighting a few, like a summary of what the project is to be, then that becomes a letter proposal. But then if it's detailed and it has a clear like indication of a full components of a full proposal, then actually that becomes a full proposal. Caroline, I don't know whether you have something to add.
No, that's exactly right. And sometimes funders will invite you to send a letter of inquiry with their own template, and then they'll ask you to submit a full proposal with your template. So it's nice to have kind of a template that you would use your own. Maybe you have a logo that you'll add to it, or maybe you'll have a stylized version that you'll want to share. But sometimes they even have for full proposals their own templates that they'll want you to fill in. So again, it really depends. And often some funders, especially for smaller grants, they'll just have like Google Forms or boxes where you have to include. So it can be helpful, especially if you're working with teams, to draft your document before you go into Google Forms. That's happened to us before, where we lose the content from using Google Forms. So just having that document as a collaborative document before you start to fill in the boxes. But yeah, lots of ways to do it, but it's helpful also to have a template that you can rely on too. Yeah. And I don't know how much time we have left to take questions. I know that we have kind of 2 minutes left to the rest of the session. I want to make sure that we get most people's questions asked, but yeah, I think we can stick around. I know that I kind of have a more solid deadline, but I don't know, Kaluki, if you're willing to stick around for some questions. But yeah, really keen to hear your last questions here. Maybe.
Definitely, Caroline, thanks for that. I'm happy if you have to dip out at any point. I'm happy to remain behind. And again, really appreciative of Modesta and Sarone, our host and all that. So I think with Sarone's leadership, then we can actually get to the next questions.
Yeah, we can move on. And just to the participants, as we continue, I have one question, and maybe I can have one or two remarks from the rest. There's the link that has been shared by Mr. Kaluki. Maybe you can, let's go and give our feedback, fill in the form. It will come in handy, maybe when we are continuing with the rest of the session. So to Mr. Paul, I have another question here. How do you navigate a co-funded project proposal when your organization needs funds, but the opportunity is a co-funded one? Is it clear? Maybe.
I don't know. I can attempt to answer it the way I understood it, and if that is not what the participant wanted, please clarify that. And my able colleague Caroline, who's really been actually our fundraising director, I think she'll weigh in because she has more experience on this. But I think in terms of co-funded projects, I'll give the example of actually one that we've been working on, that I'm leading on nature-based solutions accelerator program for, sort of like creating a platform for scaling up young restoration leaders in Africa. And we've applied potentially for funding with other key regional and global organizations. And so what this takes the shape of is that Y4N brings its own expertise, but not necessarily resources. So the next idea is to go to other partners who are bringing extra resources. For instance, they know other people that can potentially fund us, and then through our partnership with them, they can actually put forward a proposal to their the funders they've built a relationship with. And then we have other partners who actually are experts on maybe nature-based solutions. So their contribution to the project will be actually through offering, maybe a curriculum, right? Training on the curriculum, or another partner who maybe, has some experience around storytelling. If you were to have one activity as, communicating and doing some media works to tell the stories more. So then that partner actually comes in that regard, or connects us with people that can actually co-design the project. So in that regard, you sort of try to map out your partner base and understanding, what is needed and how every partner can chip in and actively play towards successful application for the project, but also really being keen on the kind of funders that you are looking for and how the partners can help you reach to these partners and therefore help secure the funding for your organization, and actually apply for one grant, but then several people will, or several organizations will fund in some small amounts to help like cover the full cost in the long run. And that's a strategy you can actually use to fundraise and get money to support your initiatives.
Yeah, very well answered, and additional points there. Thank you very much, Mr. Paul. Yeah, so maybe because of time, we are going to have one person who has raised their hand. Mr. Enoka Odongo, maybe you can have a minute to give us your views. Then you're going to have Modesta, who is going to give us the vote of thanks. And maybe if you still have a question, we have the KIUESA email in the chat box. You can air in your questions. You're going to have Mr. Kaluki answering them all, and it's they're going to be given to you. So, Mr. Enoka Odongo, you have 1 minute. Maybe you can give us your
Thank you very much. Paul has been my friend for a long time, and I'm really glad.
Did we lose him?
Likely, but I also see Sunday one and someone else has the hand up. Oluwalua.
You can help me choose one to give us the remarks, maybe.
Yeah, Marcin, do you want to probably like ask a question or your remark?
Jean, please.
Hello everyone. I did catch you very well. Thank you very much for the session. I'm Damasen and from Rwanda, very well. I appreciate it. I don't think so if you have asked me to ask my question. Is it?
Your
Do you
hand,
hear me?
your hand is raised up, so I hope you had a question.
Okay, good. Actually, the first word of your word, I didn't catch your word. I see that you wish me to speak. My question was about goals and the objectives, and I was asking which one is including in another, or which one comes first. If you can have some clarification, because I know that most of people like to confuse them, goal and objective, which comes first, which comes the next, and which one is including in another. Thank you.
Yeah, I can briefly answer that one. And it is, as Kaluki had shared in the slides too, we can share these slides with KIUESA too. But we describe goals as kind of an overarching statement, and then the objectives being more specific and measurable. So sometimes you'll find the definitions alternated, and some funders might ask for objectives, or they might ask for goals, and it's good to kind of get a sense of what they're asking for. But usually goals are the more broad, and then objectives a little bit more specific. Kaluki, I don't know if you have anything more to add to that.
You said it very well. Thank you so much, Caroline.
Yeah.
So the
Thank
goal
you.
and
Thank you. Yeah, I got it.
Under the goal. So Renee, if you're here, I think that was a really amazing one. We really thank you for Youth for Nature. From Youth for Nature side, allow me to really say thank you. And for those of us who've been from Africa, from Kenya, from other parts of the world, really it's an important one. And we are, Caroline and myself, are really humbled to have been able to, be entrusted with this particular training. Again, to remind us that we are not necessarily all the knowledge holders. We do recognize that, but also recognize that if we don't talk and share in such spaces, then we are not helping one another. So like one of our participants alluded, hopefully we can actually create more of such forum sessions to learn together to nationally so that we better move and adjust in the climate era and see what actions we can put forward, for nature, for people, and especially for young people. Caroline, if you want to give a final word before we hand over to Sarah Nailin and the team.
Thank you for those nice words, Kaluki. And it's been such a pleasure to share space with everyone. And thanks for your good questions and your engagement too. And to our hosts, especially for creating this platform. It's been a real pleasure. We don't often an opportunity to kind of share those lessons learned. So we welcome the next opportunity too. And thank you again. It's humbling to be asked to do this. So really appreciate the opportunity. I hope everyone has a great rest of your evening or day, depending on your time zone. And thanks again for spending almost 2 hours with us. Take good care, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Caroline. Thank you very much, Mr. Paul. I'm going to welcome Lynn to give us the vote of thanks as we end our session. Yeah, so karibu Lynn.
Good evening, everyone. I hope you can hear me. Apologies for my background noise. I just wanted to say I got caught in an emergency and I was not able to fully be a part of the meeting, which I really apologize for. But I am so grateful to Paul and Caroline for heeding our call to be able to train everyone. This came in from a need from our members of KIUESA who are having us issues with fundraising and project writing as well as grant writing. And I really want to thank Caroline also for taking the her time also, despite the time zone difference, to be able to actually be part of this meeting and to be able to train everyone. As mentioned, this is not the last time that we'll be able to actually have this such trainings. And we're looking forward to actually having more and more. And sorry, I hope you can hear me.
Yes, we can.
Yes. So I'm looking forward to having more and more. And for those whose questions we've not been able to answer today, feel free to actually send us an email and we'll be able to actually address such in the next sessions that we're planning. So this is not the end, and I am really hoping that we'll be able to interact more on this platform. And once again, Youth4Nature, thank you so much for coming through and being able to take your time to actually train all of us, our attendees, also for taking your time to be part of this meeting and being part of the call. Really appreciate you. So I will hand it over back to Serene. Thank you.
Yeah,
Hi, everyone.
Hi.
Hello, do you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, I just need to say thank you. The session was very, very amazing. I like it and I learned.
Thank you very much.
So just say thank you, and it will be better if we can keep it and then come up with it's gonna help us like to continue like enhancing and improving our project. So just say thank you to Caroline and Paul. Thank you very much and have a good evening.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so.
Take care, everyone.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.
We're going to end the meeting. And, any feedback, any information, please reach to hello@youth4nature.org. If you have any feedback, any questions that you might have not